Hello and welcome to one of the legendary Quickterm release webinars, this time 680. If you could please give me a thumbs up if you can hear the audio. That would be great. Otherwise, I'll be talking for an hour and nobody can hear me. Let's see. Yep, thank you very much. Right, so it's a long release webinar because it's a major release. So I'll try to actually make it in an hour. I managed to do it in German, and English is a shorter language than German, so should be okay. But let's jump right into it. And as usual, the agenda, I'll start with a short recap about the last release, then a few highlights, which we consider highlights. Then I'll go bullet after bullet through the release notes. Again, the idea of the release notes is not that you memorize them all. There won't be a quiz at the end, but there's always some where somebody says, oh yeah, this is what I was waiting for. So that's why I enumerate a lot of different little things, which a lot of them might not be relevant for you. But if you are the one waiting for number 132, then you'll say, yes, that's the one. And of course, at the end, questions, ideas, other things. So please ask your questions as normal using the question panel. I am watching it. So if I look all over the place, that's because I have the panels left and right. First and foremost, important schedule, the upgrade of the public cloud will actually happen quite soon after the release webinar this time, namely this Saturday. So please make sure if you use any local clients, make sure that you upgrade them, or your vendors, partners, whoever has them. They're already available, so you can already start the upgrade of those. So let's start with a recap. What did we introduce in the last release, 672? We did a lot around accessibility for the European Accessibility Act. So not much in features, but of course we want to be compliant with all these things. So that was a lot of work. We also did a lot of AI novelties and improvements. So we worked a lot on our prompts that you can use in order to have fields generated by AI and filled out by AI. We also came up with a prompt tester, so you can test your own prompts and refine them to work with the data that is in your specific term-based schema. And for those who are already using the retrieval endpoint, we made it a little bit easier to use because you can now address language codes and you don't have to figure out what the language IDs are first. In Quickterm itself, we have introduced an improved comparison view, as we call it. You can actually now see the individual words that have changed from the previous version to the current version, or that were edited, for example, in an edit task, and not the entire field. You can fix individual columns in the task tables. You can filter when you create the cross-reference, so you don't search the entire database, but you only search part of the filter. And we have introduced splitter and separate scroll bars for those of you who have the comments and the entry preview in the same tab. In the task list, you can now basically split these two and define the size of each, and also scroll individually in each of them. For CheckTerm, we have introduced a browser plugin, or rather we have made sure that it supports Fonto and Smart Media Creator, so two, let's say big online editors that are around. All right, let's jump right into 680 highlights in minute number 4. So that's good because, as I said, we have a lot. A very, very big change for us, maybe not as much for you as an existing customer, but for us and for Kaleidoscope going forward, is that we have rebranded Quickterm, and we are introducing a new module structure. So let me explain what that means. Basically, we have how shall I say, unified the brand name of our platform. As you all know, there used to be a little bit of confusion always in the market. Is this thing called Kalcium? Is it Quickterm? Or some even still called it Multiterm. Some actually also called it Kaleidoscope. So we tried to make this a little bit easier. We are working in the field of terminology after all, and brand names are terminology. So we are referring to it as Quickterm going forward. So there's only Quickterm, and we have come up with a new let's say claim for Quickterm, which is unleash the full potential of terminology, which of course, that should sound really nice to all of you. But we also want to bring this message home to people who are not yet on Quickterm and have not yet realized or unleashed the full potential of terminology. We also relaunched our website. So if you log on to our website, you'll see a lot more and focused information about terminology. And on the UI, this will also well, I wouldn't say impact you, but you'll notice it. So for example, the default login screen now says Quickterm and no longer Kalcium, obviously. And all over the UI, almost wherever it referred to Kalcium, it now says Quickterm. So even in things like what used to be Kalcium XML is no longer Kalcium XML, because we really try to lose that Kalcium name. A second kind of rebranding that we're doing, because of course the word Kalcium is also in our URL. You all have customer name.kalcium.cloud as the URL to log on. We are migrating that towards Terminology Cloud. Don't worry, Kalcium Cloud will still work, so you don't have to change all your links and let everybody know from one day to the other. But we think Terminology Cloud is easier to remember and also easier to explain to your colleagues and other people, because my name.terminology cloud just makes sense, whereas Kalcium Cloud, you basically had to know what Kalcium is. We just said that was a little bit difficult. So that was the rebranding exercise. We also let's say created a little bit more of a modular structure around Quickterm. I mean, it was always a little bit modular because we had the 3 editions and we had some additional products, but again, they all had their names. So now everything is going to be called Quickterm. And we actually included a couple of functionalities in Quickterm, which so far were actually, for example, in the Enterprise edition or in Checkterm altogether. So batch editing, the batch editor was only in the Enterprise edition so far, or also the quality check functionality, which was also part of Enterprise only. That is now also available to customers who do not have Quickterm Enterprise. And similarly, the terminology check in Quickterm, so which basically means in the browser UI, when you are in Quickterm, there is a check button there if you have Checkterm. That is now also available without Checkterm. That of course also means that when you work on your terminology itself, you can do terminology checks there as well. So for instance, if you're creating a definition, Quickterm will check to make sure that you're not using a forbidden term in your definition. And then, as I said, we made everything else a little bit more modular. So for a lot of you, it will obviously make sense, but it just makes it a lot easier for customers to, tailor exactly what they want more to their needs. So there is a module, as we call it now, which is called Workflows Pro. That is essentially what Quickterm Workflow was all about. And then we have a module that we call Verification Pro. And what that actually is it's the verification plugins. So the term verification terminology checking in itself is actually available within Quickterm, just a normal Quickterm application. But if you want the plugins for all these tools listed here, then you need to have the Verification Pro plugin. There's a module called Publishing Pro, which is exactly the same as publishing used to be. There's one that sounds new at first sight, but it's actually not new. We always had Excelling as a product, but we had a lot of customer questions around what is the difference actually between Excelling and the batch editor that is available in Quickterm. And the real difference is that, well, with Excelling, you can work offline. So we tried to make it clearer, and we're now calling it offline editing, because really that's what it is. It's a way to take terminology offline, work on it there, or have somebody else who is not connected to Quickterm work there, and then re-import it. So again, just making it clearer. The functionality itself doesn't change. And then we have one module, because we do have a lot of interest in the concept maps, but again, this required Enterprise edition so far. For a lot of customers, that was a little bit too much of a step to go to Enterprise just because of the concept maps, quote unquote. So we now made this a separate module. You will notice there is a gap in this visual here, and that gap is the new module that we are bringing out, which is AI Pro. What is, oh, sorry, I thought that was the next slide, but it's not. I will talk about what AI Pro is in 1 second. Just have this one slide to sneak in. Just to give you a better understanding of what that actually means for you as existing customers. So far, all of you who had Quickterm, which by definition, that has to be everybody in this call, I guess, or everybody who owns Quickterm. You will now have the batch editor functionality in there, whether or not you have Enterprise or not. Same for quality reports, and the same as the term verification. So that's always included in the main license of Quickterm. If you have Quickterm Workflow currently, basically the same holds true. So you have this new functionality, and of course you have the Workflows Pro module. If you currently have Quickterm Enterprise, same thing, but it also includes the concept maps. If you have currently CheckTerm, that means that of course you have the checking functionality available in Quickterm, plus you will keep of course the plugins, which is now what we call Verification Pro. Nothing changes for users who have publishing. Nothing changes for users who have excelling, except it has a different name. It's now called offline editing. I hope this makes sense. If not, ask a question now or contact your salesperson. But of course, we made sure that no customer is losing any functionality. The only thing that could potentially happen is that you gain functionality that you have not had. So I hope that's okay for everybody. Talking about the new module is called AI Pro. And what you can actually do with the new module is what we call tag. I'll explain a little bit what that is. I know I have done that before in recent webinars, but I really think it's a game changer for terminology. So I'll explain it once again. Sorry about that for all of you who already know that. So basically the AI Pro module contains two things. It contains the retrieval endpoint, which some of you actually already know. The retrieval endpoint allows terminologists to configure external access to the terminology database, mainly for AI purposes. Not only, that's why we called it retrieval and not, I don't know, AI endpoint or something like that, because it could theoretically also be used for other kinds of terminology retrieval. But really it is made for retrieval through LLMs. And the other component is the MCP server. So the MCP server, I think I have a slide on that as well. If not, there's numerous webinars about that already. What the MCP server actually allows you to do is it allows you to embed this tag, terminology augmented generation functionality directly into an LLM or into an AI application, which is of course MCP compliant. So MCP has been around for about a year. It was introduced by Anthropic pretty much a year ago, November last year, and it has become kind of a standard. It stands for Model Context Protocol. So that means it gives context, or it's a protocol that gives context to models. So very AI specific, and I'll show you in a few slides what that actually means. This MCP server has now been released. So for those of you who are interested, it is available as a beta. You can already have it and check it out and pilot it if you want. And we have decided to also make this functionality available in the public cloud. Some of you might know we did not in the past allow API connections in the public cloud because, of course, if you are malicious, you could theoretically crash our cloud. But with the retrieval endpoint, you really can't, because the only purpose is to retrieve stuff. So you can't, I don't know, delete the entire term base or silly things like that, or export it in millisecond intervals. So we are allowing you to do that. We do have call limits there because, like everybody else in the AI world, we don't really have an experience yet on what it means if some company really scales this massively. So we do have some call limits. I don't know them by heart, to be honest, but it's similar to what OpenAI and these other platforms give you in terms of limits. So if you do too much, then it kind of slows down. That's the idea here. But it should be fine, we think, for normal use that is not like trying to brute force the server, essentially. So reach out if you want to pilot this, if you want to try that. We would be super happy, because of course we're all gaining experience with this. What is tag? Tag is the idea to use what is normally called RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So basically, the idea is to give a model additional context when it generates content. 1 second. So a model might generate content, for instance, if you use it for an LLM translation or just as a chatbot or for content generation or whatever. Models produce content. That's what they're made for. And the traditional RAG gives it context by retrieving it from some data source. And of course, tag is a particular version of RAG, which is mainly geared or exclusively geared for terminology, or made specially for terminology. RAG is a thing, so that simply exists in the AI world. Yeah, every AI geek knows what RAG is. Tag is something that we made up at Kaleidoscope. We think it's funny to call it tag. Hope you agree. There are some others that call it term RAG, but honestly, we just think that's a little bit clunky. So we prefer tag. Plus, it's really funny because, of course, tags are also something else. And again, we have a potential for jokes and things like that. So what does tag actually rely on? Well, it relies on 4, let's say, facts of terminology work or terminology access. So on the one hand side, if you are a terminologist and you know your data model, which hopefully you know, then you know very precisely where to retrieve information from. So let's say a model wants to know the definition of a term, you know exactly where you can find that definition. And if there's no definition there, then tag can say, sorry, there's no definition, and it doesn't have to start hallucinating and making up other definitions, which an LLM, for example, would do. And even RAG tends to do, because it tends to then find things that are maybe not very related to the query, but somehow still make, I don't know, 30% sense. So this is one of the fundamentals actually of terminology management, this very, very precise and structured, very, very granular information that we have in term bases. So we take advantage of that. And we take advantage of the fact that as terminologists, we know how to precisely retrieve this data. So we know that we can set filters. We know what kind of search types we want to do. Like, do we want to do a fuzzy or a full text or a concordance search? Do we want to use stemming, or do we maybe want to analyze a text and figure out what terms are in there? So we know that, and we can configure that in the tag or retrieval endpoint, as we call it. One more thing that we have found out in our research, there's a couple of papers actually that we have published out there in the scientific world, what formats LLMs best work with. And we have discovered that slightly formatted, but not too heavily formatted formats are actually best understood by LLMs. So something like a very simple JSON or YAML. Currently, we think YAML is a very, very appropriate format, but it always also depends a little bit on the use case that you have. So also something, if you're uncertain, you can talk to us and we can figure out how to best output the terminology for your LLM use case. And last but not least, it's also real-time access via API, or actually what should be here, well, actually is here, API and MCP. So if you just plug the MCP server in your LLM, it will, when somebody generates content or translates something, it will automatically look up stuff in the term base. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this slide, but the benefits of using tag as opposed to other versions of RAG is it's faster, it's cheaper, it needs less tokens, so it also adheres to the information better. It's just more ideal for, let's say, linguistic use cases. And I think one of the most important things is it can be configured by, let's say, linguists. You could say terminologists, but not every terminologist is actually called terminologist. That's why I put quote unquote linguists here. And how do we embed this into the LLM? This is where a model context protocol comes in. I put the link down there if you want to read up on it. It's a very, very simple website actually to understand what it is. But it essentially how it works together with Quickterm and AI Pros is that it allows the terminologist or the linguist to configure how things are searched in the term base and how they are sent back to the LLM. The MCP server itself comes from us. So Kaleidoscope provides that. If you have the AI Pros module, you have an MCP server. And this MCP server basically tells the LLM what it can expect. So you can tell it, for example, well, if you want to look up a translation, use me and I will look into the term base and I will give you back the translation. Or if you want to check a text and figure out if there's forbidden terms, use me, call me, and I will look it up in the term base and let you know. And this, of course, can be used in many, many different use cases: translation, content generation, chatbots, other sorts of disambiguation you want to do. So a lot of things theoretically that you can do. And the nice thing is configured by the linguists, so we stay in charge. We know how the term base works. And actually the IT people, all they need to do is they need to enter the URL of the MCP server, which is your Quickterm URL, plus you get an authentication code. So there's like an AI authentication token that you put there, and then the LLM can already talk to the MCP server. There's really nothing else you need to do to configure that. Couple of examples of advantages. Again, I think the biggest advantage simply is that if you have MCP, your IT division does not need to understand how to develop any integration with the terminology database. That's already all there. So we from Kaleidoscope, we deliver that because we give you the MCP server with everything pre-configured. So I think it's a real game changer for terminologists or linguists, as I call them here, quote unquote, because what that means is that you can actually push out the terminology into the entire company without people really even knowing that they're using it. So whenever they're using something that has to do with AI, like Microsoft Copilot, for example, you can very easily plug this MCP server into Copilot. Then everybody says, I don't know, please translate this email into Spanish. It will automatically look up the term base and see if any of these terms actually exist in Spanish. So I think that's a real game changer because it makes it really, really easy to push terminology out into the entire company. Um, some examples, I've prepared some examples for those of you who have not yet seen them, maybe just very short ones. So this is a translation example. So for example, I have this sentence, and sorry, this is in part German because translation has to do with two languages. So for example, here we have a sentence that contains the word Schraube, which in English can be translated into screw or bolt, depending on where you screw it in, basically. This is a problem. Machine translation or LLM translation can't resolve this. But with Tag or with AI Pro, you can, because it will look it up in the term base. And it does not only retrieve the translation, like, I don't know, machine translation would do, but here the terminologist has configured, for example, that it should also return the usage note. Because in the usage note, I have this information when I should use which translation for it. And just doing that, it disambiguates automatically. The other way around, here we have an example where the word insulation has to be translated into German differently depending on what is actually being insulated. And you can see here it has Isolierung, and then here it has Dämmung. It's both insulation in English. One is thermic, the other one is electric. But again, just because in this case we have two concepts, so both ways are possible, doesn't make a difference to the LLM. Here we have two concepts with different definitions, and the LLM immediately knows which one it has to use. So that's a translation use case. You can do the same for content creation, of course. You can do the same, for example, also for a chatbot. So this is one of my favorite terms from a customer of ours. If you ask a normal LLM, what is a bolter miner? On the right-hand side, you see a GPT-4o. It will tell you, it's basically saying, I don't know. It's a little bit verbose, but it's saying, I really don't know. And on the left-hand side, it actually found it in the term base. So it found out bolter miner written as one word is actually forbidden. It's a very common mistake made by German speakers to, put compound nouns also into English. And then it says, okay, well, the preferred term is actually two words, plus this is the definition. And then, for example, if you take this bolter miner one step further and you say something like, can you please write the customer care email, or I don't know, you look it up in the support portal or something like that. It's really fun to do that, actually, because since GPT-4o has no clue what the bolter miner is, it comes up with all kinds of funny answers and hallucinations. So here it says automatic reporting, predictive analysis, operational efficiency. So basically pretty much whatever. And on the left-hand side, where you have the term base and the definition behind it, it actually produces meaningful content out of the term base. So it retrieves that from the definition. It found some other stuff because in this particular use case, it also looks into the concept map and sees, well, what's linked to that, etc. So it's not only the bolter miner, it found also some related terms. That's also a function actually in our MCP server, is find related terms. And then it'll look into the concept map to find things that have to do with the main concept. So that's a little bit about, I think, our main feature, the new module, AI Pro. And if you haven't had enough AI functionality yet in our highlights, we have a few more. One thing we have introduced in the terminology verification, I now have to say, because it's not check term anymore. Check term does not exist anymore. We have introduced batch AI replace. So we can say, okay, if you find problems, please just fix them using AI. Ideally, you would want to check that. If you don't want to check it, you can also turn that off. We have also introduced what we call the Quickterm Copilot. We decided to call it Copilot because everybody else is calling these things Copilot as well. And Microsoft does have the rights to it, but it is encouraging everybody to use the word Copilot. So here we go. And then on a prototype level, we have a prototype for a tag plugin for Trados Studio. So basically using the functionality that I just showed you with AI Pros, using that, for example, to translate directly in Studio. Few videos for that as well. So the batch AI replace. Here we can actually see that in Studio. We already have a verification plugin in Studio. So for example, this is an actual customer text that we translated from, let me see, German into English. And then of course we can verify that. This is existing functionality in what used to be Quickterm in the Studio plugin. So we were always able, for example, to select different analysis profiles, because of course terms can be allowed or forbidden depending on the context. Maybe we can select the analysis type. We can select a few other things that are word specific. Let me just go a little bit faster here. And then we get search results. So again, this is not new functionality. This has been there for term verification. And of course, there are easy things like this one. So instead of translating leaning protection, the term base says, please translate lean protection feature. So you don't lean against the drawers and they open automatically. Here we can just do search replace. Okay, that's easy. But for example, the one before that, in the English translation, it says silently and effortlessly. The term base actually says it should be soft and effortless. But of course, that has to be rewritten because otherwise it would be wrong grammatically. So this is where AI can help already. And then here it gets a little bit more complex because there's a word, klappen in German, which gets translated in 3 different ways, depending on the context, depending on where exactly that is in the furniture. And the terminological entry for that is actually interesting because the usage note is in German. So sorry for those of you who don't speak German. But since it's an Austrian company, it's okay, we think, to write the usage note in German. It's meant mainly for German speakers. But here again, the LLM can now figure that out, because if we tell tag, please return also the usage note, the LLM actually also understands the German usage note. So what we can do now here is we can basically debug our translation, and it'll automatically do all these changes with AI. And then, of course, very likely you want to review them. So then the next thing you do is you say, okay, I want to approve all these changes. And then it basically shows you all the things it's changed. So it's changing flaps to wall cabinet covers, depending on the context here in the German source language. And of course, the silently versus softly, that's an easy fix because, yeah, an LLM can simply do that. And what you can do now is you can select the ones you want to change, or just say select all, and then basically apply that. You can also skip that step. So if you completely trust AI to do everything right, which we don't recommend, just for the record, then you can completely skip that and say, well, it's only going to get better anyhow and not worse. So yeah, why not risk it? But again, we would definitely recommend checking that. The same thing actually works in Quickterm as well. So if you don't have the plugins, if you don't have the Verification Pro license, but you can upload a translated file into the browser, into Quickterm or the Quickterm UI, and then the same thing works here. So I have this exact same text here. In the video, I just go on batch AI replace immediately. Then it does that in the background. It says I'm done. And then you can either say, okay, download the fixed file, or you can go on this batch AI approve, check all the changes, and then probably accept them all, or you could also only accept some of them, and then download the fixed file. So it also works here. So I think also a pretty interesting thing. There's a question about whether we have XTM integration also for that. Good question. So if XTM can output a bilingual file that is compatible to the one that we upload here, that would work. You would be able to upload an XLIF file, have it parsed, and then download it again. A tighter integration we don't have. So the only application or the only translation environment, if you want, where we have this really, really tight integration is Studio. Also because it's the only application that actually allows us to do that. So you need to have an application that lets you get into it so that you can put all these buttons into it. And Studio is the only one that actually allows that. Last but not least, on the AI front, I think last, I might be wrong, let's see, is our Copilot. This is a beta feature, so if you want to use it, please let us know so that we can turn it on. It's a beta feature simply because it's AI, so we want to learn a little bit how useful is it? Do you want to use it? What questions arise? So essentially what you can do is you can chat with an entry. So for example, here I'm telling it, create this entry in German and English, add some synonyms, label them preferred and rejected, add all the term level fields, and create a definition. And it does that all in once. So it now created a German and English entry for this particular term with fairly reasonable metadata. Again, it's all AI, so please check. It even created a deprecated synonym, so it says technische Doku. We shouldn't use that because it's jargon. Same in English, it creates tech docs and says this should be deprecated. So I find it interesting that it actually creates deprecated synonyms. But now I could go on and chat more with the entry. So for example, I could say, well, the German definition is lacking the official definition of technical documentation. So we might want to add that. And I give it the information that this is how the German TECOM defines technical communication. And then it kind of mixes the two definitions into one. I could go on and say, make this shorter, remove the parentheses. I don't know. I mean, there's a limit when it just makes more sense to go in and type it, I guess, but it's going to be interesting to see how our customers actually use this. I do think if you have a, if you're creating an entry with many fields, this might be a very useful automation idea. You can, of course, also translate it. In this demo video, I'm just using a generic LLM, but of course, if you have some sort of a tuned LLM that has your data in it, then it might actually prove useful. Again, currently this is just an LLM that we're using. It's not any trained AI or something like that, because as you remember, we connect to your LLM. We don't actually supply our own. Yeah, I do have one more short little video. That's the prototype of our Trados Studio tag a plugin. So basically here we have again a sentence. Let me just pause it briefly to explain. So here we again have a sentence with the problematic word. So we have the German word Welle here and here, but it's a homonym, so it can mean two completely different things. And of course, if you machine translate it, I think this was DeepL, but I'm not sure. Might have been modern MT. Doesn't matter, they both get it wrong. It says when the ship hits a wave, there's a risk that the ship's wave breaks. And of course, this wave is wrong. In this case, it's not a wave, it's a shaft or something like that. And then the other example I have is the one we already saw, where the German word screw needs to be translated once as screw, but the other time it needs to be translated as bolt, depending on the context. And we use the same technology that we did before. So the LLM is connected to via MCP to a term base, and I forgot to log in when I took the video, so I have to log in first. And there's something lying behind this, but it doesn't matter. And then I can either do this interactively by clicking on the button, which is what I do in the video, or of course I can use it for batch processing as any other translation provider. And you can see that here it actually translates the ship's shaft correctly, because again, it gets the context, it gets the definitions of the one wave and the other wave. I'm actually showing that here. So if I look this up in the term base, then this is what the LLM got. So it got the definition that if it's the movement of water, then it should be this translation. If it's a component of a ship, which connects the engine to the rotor, then the shaft. And again, this is all the LLM needs. Then it can figure out the rest and actually translate it correctly. And of course, here we have the example with the two bolts, but I'm gonna jump over that for reasons of time. Because I actually also have non-AI highlights. So not everything we have in this release has to do with AI. There is some non-AI stuff as well. We have a new customer, actually, I think on the call, so hello, with very long and complex hierarchical pick lists. And for them, everybody else can say thank you. We came up with a new pick list editor and a pick list value selector. I'll show you what that means. Another thing is we introduced multi-select in the hit list. So we've had customers that say we want to run a search, then we want to select 5 of those entries and then do something with them. Delete them, add them to a project, send them into a workflow, I don't know, recommend them to the users, whatever. But we want to do actions on more than only one concept. And last but not least, there was a strong wish from several customers actually to be able to also use formatting in the comments when you chat with each other in in workflow. So let's look at the pick list editor. So I have this is actually not a complex pick list in this video, but it works also with thousands of entries. So to start with, you can now much better navigate these hierarchical pick lists, and particularly you can much more easily add something. So I don't know why this is not going away. This should go away. So I have a plus symbol next to each of the fields, and if I click on that plus symbol, it actually adds a field underneath or nested underneath that exact field. So this is a lot easier than before. And here we have a new option, which is use this new pick list selection dialog rather than simply a drop down. And what that does is, if I now go in and create a new entry, and I select that field, it now opens a dialog with several options. So first of all, you can open and close the pick list down here and choose the values that you want. I can also say expand all, collapse all, if that's meaningful, depending on the size. You can select all and deselect all, and then it does exactly that. But you can also filter. It says search, but it's really a filter. So for example, if I say system, it displays everything that contains the word system, and then you can select those two. And then two options that have to do with the fact that it's a hierarchical list. So I can say automatically select child values. And you saw that, maybe I'll go back a few seconds. I actually clicked on geography with that option selected, and it automatically also selects all the things that are beneath geography. The same thing works the other way around. So if I click mountains, it automatically selects everything that's above mountains, hierarchically speaking. Into the field, we always write all the selected values. This goes hand in hand with the TBX standard, which also defines that no matter the hierarchy in the subject field itself, we want to have each and every value. What we're also gonna bring in the upcoming version in Q1 is a way to now be able to filter this. So currently, if you want to filter, for example, geography and everything under geography, you would still actually have to select each of them. But we will be coming up with a filter where you can say filter on geography and any of the children. So that's also coming. We didn't get it into this release, but that will come in the next release. So yeah, thank you very much for the contribution for this one as well. For the multi-select and hit lists, the way this works is if you run just a normal search, you of course get just a normal hit list, but then you can switch this hit list over to this multi-select version, and then basically it opens a checkbox in front of each and every term, because it's a hit list. But of course, this understands that in this case, for example, 3 terms are actually in the same entry. So it also selects all the other terms of that entry, so you don't get confused. You can also select a term here and only look at it without selecting it. So that's also possible. So it depends on whether you click on the hit list result or on the checkbox to select it or not. And then I can do whatever I can do to an individual entry. So for example, I can assign it to a project. By the way, we can now also create the project on the fly. So now I don't have to leave this dialog and say, damn, I still need to create my project. We can do that right here. And I, for example, can assign these selected entries to the project. Or for example, I can send out an approval task. I get the batch approval task dialog, which is complex because of course there are already some languages approved, etc., etc. But basically this is the multi-select. I think that's a very cool feature. So you could, rather than having to define filters and then automation tasks, etc., you just run a search and then you say, okay, I want to do something with these 8 entries, for example. You also don't have to go into the batch editor. You can do it straight from here. And then last but not least, that's actually a quick demo. We also have formatting in the comments. So here we have a normal format, a normal comment. We can open the formatting editor. I'm not sure what that's called officially. And then, for example, I can add bullets, or I can add images, or boldface stuff, or have headers, or I don't know, something like that. So it's now a completely formatted, or you have the option of completely formatting the comments that you write in there. Right, so that was the highlights. I already threatened that this was going to be a long one, so I'm going to try to hurry up through the release notes. As I said, the thought about these is, if there's one here that you say, right, that's what I have been waiting for, you should have received that anyhow through the support portal, but if you haven't, or you're also waiting for it, then you find it here. This is mainly for administrators. So if you're in the cloud, this is not really relevant because we administer the cloud. But if you do have an on-premise, then there are some things here around security and authentication and things that have changed a little bit. This one is interesting, uploading PDFs. So there is a security issue with PDFs that have scripts. This somehow came up quite surprisingly only now, because that has been around for a very long time and is potentially harmful. So actually by default, you cannot upload PDFs with scripts into Quickterm, for example, to the attachments, which makes sense. But if it's your own PDFs and you know, yes, they have scripts, but they're not dangerous scripts, then you can actually turn off that security screening. We don't recommend it because it is harmful potentially. But yeah, you could do it if you needed to. Around notifications, for notifications that have to do with automation tasks, we now include the task name, or we can include it into the email. And also in the log files around automations, we include the Quickterm version number, easier for support, of course. For the mail notification settings, we now have a minimum priority. So for example, if you set the minimum priority for emails to medium priority, that means that low priority doesn't get sent out at all. So only things that are at least medium priority will get notified. So essentially you can turn off notification for the less important things. And some additional information on suspicious activities on your server. Again, this is mainly for admins and for us as cloud admins. On the AI side, yes, a little bit more AI, sorry. You can now configure more than one AI provider. In the past, this was only one, but now you could theoretically use different AI providers or different AI providers for, let's say, different actions that you do in Quickterm using the AI. Also, we now support Gemini as a new AI provider. And in order to help you building prompts, we now have basically some sort of an online help for we call it macro, but the variables or parameters you can use in the prompt. So if you click on this little button here with the tag / in it, this basically opens a list. And this is really specific to your term base. So you can scroll through it and you can see if you want to reference, I don't know, the context, for example, you will find that here, and you don't have to remember how to exactly type that. For retrieval purposes, profiles, you can now create private profiles, so only for you. It is possible to export entry IDs using AI and essentially the retrieval endpoint now as well. And we have improved the language handling even more. So you really don't have to look up language codes and things like that anymore, in case you have already tried programming against our AI. In the API, we have revised our error codes a little bit to help developers understand them better. And for those of you who also have term catch, we have an interesting integration now, which basically allows you to look up synonyms inside term catch. Term catch is the terminology extraction application that we resell by our Swedish partner Fodina. So basically here I have a new entry or maybe a term request, and it contains the word homepage. And I have a new button here that basically says, look into term catch, into our corpus that we have extracted there, and see if we find synonyms. And it goes in there and it says, oh, I found all these synonyms within term catch. So essentially it's from your own corpus. So this doesn't go out into an LLM and ask it for synonyms. This actually really is from your corpus, and you can select the ones that you want or don't want. And then when you say add, it'll actually add them to the entry that you had open. So quite a useful feature. For example, if you get a term request and you're not sure, well, maybe this is a synonym with something. If you have term catch, you can very quickly look it up in the term base as well, of course, because the term base is part of that corpus as well, and all your extracted documents, online resources, etc. So yet another really nice use case, I think, for term catch. A few details on the UI configuration. The product logo is now theme specific. So we've had some customers that had a white logo on white background. It's a little bit difficult to read, or a black logo on black background. Now you can set this up depending on the theme that you use. So dark theme, normal theme, and accessibility, the high contrast theme. In the workflow configuration, we now have a comment field, basically, so you can set up little notes for yourself, so you remember what this actually did, this workflow step. We have a lot more context-sensitive help icons on the tabs themselves. So on many tabs, you will now have a question mark, which leads you directly to the explanation of that tab in our documentation. We have some additional columns in the user management, and also you can filter on user groups to make managing the users a little bit easier. And yeah, one nice thing on the dashboard, you can now include a video. The way this works, I have a short video on how to work with videos. Basically, you upload the video as a resource. So we have a new resource type here that is called video. We can upload just a video that your browser supports, and then you can reference that video in the widget on the dashboard. So for example, here I have prepared something. This is how you set search profiles, for example. You can also link directly to a URL, but of course, if you upload it, then it's a little bit more stable because it won't go away. You can define a width and a height like in images, and then it embeds this video, and yeah, you can basically watch that video on the welcome screen. So maybe useful to explain some features or something like that. Few things around the automation task. The entry change history automation, if you don't know that yet, maybe you want to look into it. Basically what that does is you can set up a, let's say, weekly email that includes all the changes in your term base. There are filters, etc. I also like to call it the terminology newsletter, essentially, and that now has a preview. So it was a little bit difficult to see whether what you're sending out is actually what you want to send out. So now you have a preview. And as a small little detail, you can now also use language flags to show exactly in which language which change was done. You can use an external file as a filter for automation tasks. That was available in some automation tasks, but not in all. Now it's in all of them. And if you are a big fan of inconsistency checks in Quickterm, there is one thing that we changed. It was a little bit illogical on how to filter on languages and terms. We now have brought that together, so there are not two different places where you select languages and terms, and in the other one you filter on them. This is now all in one. This is way more logical, but it does mean if you have an automation task like that set up, you do need to go into it, please, and reconfigure it, because the other filter option simply doesn't exist anymore. And yeah, for terminology notification emails, you can now access the data of the entire entry. This was limited to, I think, only the term. I'm not even sure. But now you can access every field in this terminology notification email, whichever emails you send out there. One more thing, in the schema editor, we have introduced the ability to reuse a field. So for example, if you have subject field, both on the entry level for classification, but also on the term level for usage information, it's the same pick list, the same field. In the past, you could copy it, but then you had two separate fields. So the pick lists were not the same. They were just identical in the beginning, but then if you change one, the other one didn't change, and now they are really the same. So it's basically really referencing, pointing to the other one both ways. So if you change it in one of the fields, it's also changed in the other, because it's just a reused field. It's not actually copied. A tiny thing that I personally really wanted to have there was in the taxonomy. If you have a taxonomy thing, I don't know, a leaf, I guess it would be on the branches. If you have one selected and then you open the drop down, it didn't jump there. You kind of had to search it again. Now, if you open the drop down, it actually jumps to where this thing is, so that, for example, you can deactivate it more easily. You can, of course, also click on the little X, but I just thought that was really weird that it didn't jump there. Yeah, I think the next one is not that interesting. I think the terminology filter might be interesting for you. So there's a new filter option now to say, show me all entries that belong to a project. Or for example, in the automation tasks, do something with all the entries that belong to a project. So that's a new condition, belongs to project. I think that's quite useful to do more with projects in general. Yeah, so this is the one here. Project ID contains, yeah, this particular project. One important thing for the style sheets, you know that images in HTML should have an alt text to it. So if the image doesn't display, then the alt text is displayed, but also it again has to do with accessibility. So the screen readers they can't read an image, but they will read the alt text. The way we have incorporated that is that you create a nested field in the schema underneath the figure. So for example, here in the screenshot, you can see there's a nested field very creatively called alt, but it could be called anything. And then in the style sheet, you can say, okay, which field actually contains my alternative text. And then you can choose, for example, that it's this alt text here. Alt stands for alternative and not for German old, by the way. And there's a new way of aligning fields in the style sheet, which is with an offset. So basically you can see it here. It looks kind of funky if you don't have a lot of metadata, but if you do, then it's actually nice. So you can say I have an offset of, I don't know, 200 pixel. And then basically it right aligns the field name to these 200 pixels. And then it left aligns the field content to those 200 pixels. So if you've always wanted to format your entries like that, now you can. For the entry change history, we now have an expiration date, so we can say delete all the entry change history that is older than so and so many days. Simply has to do with database size, and you might not want to see entry change history that is older than 3 years or something like that. Maybe you do, then disable this feature. Default is disabled, of course. But if you've always wanted to clean up that a little bit, then you now can, and of course it's automatic. Tiny detail, but also useful when you export something, then the export type is now part of the file name. So for example, it'll say Quickterm XML or multi-term XML or something like that as the part of the file name actually. In the entry editor, if you add a language, then the dropdown is sorted alphabetically. It used to be kind of random, but now it's actually alphabetical. It wasn't really sequence in which you have added them to the schema originally, but very often that just didn't make a lot of sense. So now it's alphabetical. And the hotkey that we introduced, I think 2 releases ago, to jump from one field to the other, we had promised that we would eventually make that configurable. So now it is configurable. So for every user group, you can set up a different hotkey to jump from one field to the next. Keep in mind, if you don't think about that well, it might not work. So if you use a hotkey that the browser hijacks for something else, or maybe even the operating system hijacks, or some other application uses that hotkey, it might not work. So you have to maybe play a little bit with that and see what works. So for example, Alt Enter or something like that won't work because that normally does something else in the browser. If you synchronize to the Trados Cloud, they have introduced a little bit more formatting in their fields. So now we support that as well. If you use that as a repository. And in the batch editor, small change, but also helpful sometimes if you find, oh, you know what, this 5th change that I wanted to do, I actually don't want to do that anymore because you found out on the preview that it really did the wrong thing. You can simply remove this one batch change, but do all the other ones before you had to start over and define everything again without this one. A few things for the workflow. In the translation dialog, you can now configure that the search should only search for allowed source terms. In the past, it searched for all. So if you had a word in your, if you had a term that you wanted to translate, it searched in the entire term base, no matter whether this term was allowed or forbidden in the term base. That sometimes meant that it found 5 different entries and only one of them was the one you wanted. So now you can define that. And also you can define how many target terms a translator shall be displayed by default, a maximum number. So for example, if you have a source entry with 15 terms, in the past, the translator always saw all 15 terms, when of course you don't actually want to translate 15 terms likely. So you can say, well, show maximum of 3. If there's only 1, it'll obviously only show 1. We now always show the concept map. So wherever you have an entry preview, you can switch to the concept map. That was not very consistent throughout the application. On the normal search dialog, the term requests / feedback buttons, in the past were always displayed, no matter whether they worked or not. Now, if you don't have a workflow configured for them, they won't show because you can't use them anyhow. The project creation on the fly, I already showed. And the agile user selection wasn't working for the to-do tasks, or it simply wasn't implemented. Now it is. So now this agile way of working works for all tasks. Whoa, English is a lot longer language than German after all, sorry. We have a new thing for the concept maps. We had some customers that say it's really difficult to work with concept maps if they are next to the entry. If you're like that, then you can change the behavior and say, I want to have this pop-up. So you can click on this button, it opens the concept map in a pop-up. You can navigate there, and when you close it back down, then the entry is where you navigated to. And another thing you can do in the concept map is you can format the nodes differently depending on a type. And the way that works is I made a little video to explain it better. In the concept map configuration, so what we call the ontology configuration, you now have a new tab here, which is concept types. So you can set up different kinds or types of concepts with different formatting, for example, different background color or something like that. And then in the concept maps themselves, you can basically assign this type to different concepts. So I need to zoom in here a little bit. So for example, here I can say, okay, the one up here, I want this to be I called it main component in my demo. And then it knows it has to be gray because that's how I configured it. And I think I do another main component here. And then you could say, okay, well, this is I don't know, a feature or something else, subcomponent in my demo. And then you could say, okay, I want to make those blue, or they should not have a border or something like that. Just to make it possible to format the concepts differently individually on the concept map. For terminology checking in the browser interface, it's now possible to edit text. So in the past we could fix terminology, but we couldn't actually freely edit the text. Since it now has become a default part of Quickterm, it was necessary to be able to do that here as well. Also, when you upload an Excel file, you can tell Quickterm to please consider the content of this Excel file to be XML, because otherwise it would just have tags and it wouldn't actually parse the XML. Now you can do that. And also for terminology checking, you can tell Quickterm that a stemmed match should be considered a fuzzy match. So if you also find a non-stemmed match for the same term, then that would take preference against the stemmed one. Few things on publishing. We now support OAuth 2 for API outputs. This has become quite necessary because a lot of systems don't allow you to log in anymore with a plain username, password, or a token or something like that. So now we can use OAuth 2 for that. You can create private tasks that only you can see, so you don't spam everybody else's publishing list with your own tasks. There's a question here. Is it possible for translation and lookup to show the longest source term? Longest source term. Hide. Well, there is a way to sort them. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I think you can sort them and say, I want to see the short ones in the beginning. I think you can sort them. Not 100% sure. I'll have to check on that. I'll get back to you about that. Yeah, also in publishing, what you can do is you can select specific fields that you do not want to overwrite in the target term base. So for example, if you have MemoQ as a target term base and you want to do the linguistic stuff there and not in Quickterm, then you could say, just leave those fields alone, please, when you update the term base. We have a retry logic for multi-term server in particular. We can automatically do a reorganization. And particularly for MemoQ connectors, we now have a version selector because they have a new API. So you can select which one of the APIs you want to use. I'm getting towards the end, but I will not make it in the hour. Sorry about that. We are ending support of Trados Studio 2021 for our Studio plugin. We think it's okay because Trados also doesn't support that anymore, and it's always a bit of a security thing because it uses an outdated .NET framework, so we didn't want to support that anymore either. And for offline editing, For those who can't remember, that's a new name for excelling. It is now possible to re-import fields on term level without importing the term itself. In the past, that simply wasn't possible. And with that, I'm actually through with the new stuff, pretty much on time, but I do still have the roadmap. So for those of you who have to run, thanks for joining. The recording will be available, of course, but I will continue for another 5 minutes here or so. Please make sure you remember to update your local clients and everybody else's local clients who are using them. It will be this weekend on Saturday, as usual, on Saturday. Yeah, we didn't want to push it into January like last year, so we wanted to also not have it too close to Christmas. So we know it's a little bit hectic now to do this within a week, but we think that overall this makes more sense than waiting yet another week for this. What's on the roadmap for the 681 release, which is coming up soon, actually in Q1 2026? There's going to be a lot of AI stuff, of course, around again. So the Studio plugin that I showed you, we want to launch a beta for that in the 681 version. And the MCP server, which is currently in beta, we want to have productized. Of course, we need your input for that, your feedback. So please, if you're interested in trying it out, let us know. We'll make that possible in the next months to be able to pilot the MCP server. We're also revamping our entire prompt management. So currently this is a little bit difficult to get to. And also, for example, in the term-based schema, you can only set up one prompt per field. Since we now have Copilot and we're thinking about other stuff where we want to use prompts, we want to make this just easier and more obvious where you can actually manage these prompts. And we're also thinking, where else can we use AI? Where else can we use prompts? Automatically creating terms of the week or automatically creating term quizzes are just some of the thoughts around there. What we also want to do is we want to bundle up all of our plugins and desktop tools into one installer. We want to call that the Quickterm app. So in the past, there's like 3-4 different installers for the different desktop tools that we have. That's just a little bit complicated for users who want to use all of them. So there's going to be one installer. Of course, you can choose which ones you want to install. And of course, you can also install everything. But then if you don't have the server license, you won't be able to use those functionalities. One other very big thing is we have some new customers that have very, very complex validation requirements around entries. So for example, one field can only contain this value if another field contains that value. And so really complicated requirements as to what is actually valid content in an entry. And we are going to make that completely configurable. So you can really write your own validation rules and say, whatever in this field, I can only input stuff if something else is a specific value, or even what you type there, you can make dependent on something else. This will be available both in the entry editor and also in the automation tasks. So we'll also want to have an automation task that allows you to verify if your entries are valid and potentially go over them and fix them. We are, particularly for some of our US customers, we will be coming up with a new notification provider so that notifications don't only go out by email, sorry, but also by Slack. Slack is the first one. We are, of course, then thinking about doing the same thing for Teams and other chat platforms, essentially, so that Slack users will get a notification, please log on and check your task or whatever you want to notify that. I don't know what it looks like because it hasn't been developed yet, but the idea is similar to what we currently have as email notifications. In the task management, we want to be able to have internal comments. So currently we can just comment and everybody can read it. But like in a troubleshooting ticket like Jira, there is this internal comment functionality that only, for example, the terminologists can see. We'll make that available. And we'll make it available for you to also use videos in entries. Currently, we have that on the dashboard only. That was the biggest request. But we are going to make this available for entries as well. So you can play videos in your entries. That was that. Some other things. I have announced that we want to work on the Quickterm user community. So this is starting. We had said after TACOM, which is essentially now. We've all digested TACOM now. So we are going to work on the Quickterm user community. Hopefully next time I'll have a real update on that. For those of you who speak German, we are very proud that in March we will have I don't know how many, third or fourth, I think, version of our terminology conference, which should be very interesting to you because it is geared exclusively towards corporate customers. So it's not academic, it's not institutional language divisions of governments or things like that. It is really corporate terminology use. It is German. We have had the request to do something similar in English. So far, our German-speaking user base is just the biggest one, and we're doing it together with 2 other partners who are also in Germany. But if you do speak German and you're interested in exchanging experiences with other specifically corporate customers, take note. This is the URL to the website, so you can read a preliminary program there already. But of course, all the content is really geared towards corporate terminology use cases. And that was that. So I will, as usual, stay online for a couple of minutes to see if there are any other questions. One last thing, which I have on here. Upon very popular request, also by our own team, we spent quite some time creating a return on investment white paper for terminology and a return on investment calculator. So we would be really curious if you could try this out, see what you think. If you have any feedback on that, be it positive or negative or hopefully constructive, that would be really cool if you could just try it out. The QR code will take you there. If it doesn't work or you're not quick enough shooting the QR code, just let us know. We'll point you there. And with that, oops, I almost closed the meeting now. I did want to close this one question so I can see the other ones. I'll figure it out. I'll stay online a little bit longer, but all of you who have to run, thanks a lot for listening. 6 minutes too long, but I hope it was worth it. And I'll see you again in, I guess, March, more or less, for the next release webinar. Bye.